Teachers of Reddit. What successful students of yours ended up much worse than you expected? Story 1. I thought I had a student that was a low performer turned success last year. I was a student for 2 years, junior and senior, and we did not get off on the right foot. He was making some suggestive remarks, and I'm a young teacher. I went to my administration to have them talk with him, and he was convinced I didn't like him because of his race. I pushed for him to actually do work and didn't put up with his crap. I spell out my expectations for each assignment before it's begun, and I gasp, expect my students to attempt the assignment and slowly become better at their skills as the semester progresses. This student retaliated by not doing work, like literally not doing the essays, 50% of the grade, on his tests and just flat out not doing classwork and homework. I did everything I could to rectify the situation. We spoke together with the counselor, brought in family members, had multiple one-on-one conversations, created behavior plans, and the works. He ended up failing me junior year and was on course to fail me his senior year. A month before graduation, the day he got his cap and gown, he pulled the counselor and me aside and said he wanted to graduate and he'd do what he could to pass my class. He busted his butt that last month and ended up with a 69.1. I had seen such an amazing turnaround in him. I had no issues bumping his grade to a 69.5, which rounded up to a 70. I gave him a hug at graduation and told him I expected great things from him. By this point, he and I were good. There was mutual respect. I learned 6 months later he had a job at a local stitching company and was doing well. I was so incredibly proud and happy for him. He's now awaiting trial for murder in a substance deal gone wrong. Story 2. I spoke to a high school teacher recently who told me how she had this one golden class about 10 years ago, and in this class there was one special girl, kind to everyone, popular without being bossy, trained horses in her spare time, supportive and loving parents, and a straight-A student who wanted to become a vet. I see a lot of girls who want to be vets, but this one had what it takes. The teacher said that if someone put a gun to her head and asked her to rank all the students she ever had in a 30-year career, this girl would be at the head of the line. That girl is now serving life in prison for killing her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, chopping her up with a hacksaw and burying the parts in the woods. Story 3. One student was very dedicated, valedictorian, etc., and wanted to be a doctor. He started at the university in our town, not a bad science program, and cheaper, but his mother kept a very tight rein on him. Between that and the pressures of school, he tried to end his life and had to drop out for a while. I was so sad for him. On the flip side, there are lots of kids who don't do great in HS, but go on to be very successful. They maybe just don't do well in a traditional school environment, haven't hit their academic stride or subject interest yet, or have issues at home. It's rare that I have a student who does not do well in class, and I think she or he will struggle in life. Story 4. Had a student get a full ride to a well-known university for basketball. He signed his letter of intent, then stopped coming to school. I and his other teachers called home at least once a week and left messages until the number eventually stopped working. Fast forward to a week before graduation, his mom comes up to school screaming about the fact that he isn't going to graduate, and he has to so he can play basketball, etc. She claimed that since he had already signed the letter of intent, that meant that he would just graduate regardless of what he did his senior year. It was the most surreal thing I ever heard. Last I heard, he was selling substances and in a gang, which is really sad. Had another student who lacked any amount of confidence, but was willing to work really hard at just about anything. This kid stayed after school with me every single day for 3 years to work on her writing skills. She ended up graduating second in her class, got a scholarship to a really good school, finished undergrad in 3 years, and is now going for her MBA, which is fully paid for by the college. I talk about her to all of my classes because she is the epitome of what determination and hard work can do. She is also now my goddaughter, after she and her mom asked me to be during her senior year of high school. Story 5. This girl was a classmate of mine. She was a super nice girl, top of the class in everything, played multiple sports, and just seemed to have it all together. She received tens of thousands in scholarship money to go to pharmacy school. She lasted about a half semester freshman year, ended up partying way too much and couldn't keep up with the workload. She got super drunk the night before meeting with the dean and went in hungover to the meeting that held her fate. She soon became pregnant and has multiple kids. She wasted an insane amount of people's money, and most disappointing was her wasted talent. Last I knew, she was a cashier at a hardware store. Story 6. I work with special ed students. I had a student with autism I worked with. He was midway on the spectrum. Not high functioning, but not high needs either. Anyway, when he was in high school, I was the only one who could get him to do work. He was often moody. I am of the firm belief that if you build a relationship with students, especially those with behavior and emotional needs, they will decide that they will work for you. Well, this kid would do his work if I was there helping him. He went to a program at the local community college aimed at special needs kids. This kid blossomed there. He took media classes, started writing ideas for shows and movies, and literally became the rock star of the program. I ran into him at the school I work at graduation a few years ago. At this time, he had been out of my program for 2 years. He ran up to me and gave me a giant hug. He looked at me with a giant smile on his face, excitedly telling me about school and a trip Guy was taking with his media program to New York over the summer, and how he had a girlfriend now. This was a kid who would talk with his head down and mumble most of the time. I nearly cried when he was telling me this. He was still considered part of the school district students, until he aged out last year. I was told that at his exit meeting, he said one of the jobs he wanted was to come and work in the classrooms as an assistant with Miss Bijouette. That's my boy. Story 7, former high school teacher here. Had a student who goofed off, didn't do his work, but we had an okay relationship. He messed around, but he wasn't mean to me or others. Just didn't want to be in school, resented being forced to go to school when he could work with his buddy on cars in his buddy's garage like they'd been doing since they were kids. Had a lot of talks with him. You gonna work in your friend's garage the rest of your life or what? Talked to counselors, other teachers, his mom, and he failed my class. Terribly, actually. It was my first year of teaching. Take a breath and reset. Guess who bops into my room on the first day of school? He took summer school, passed the summer school version of my class no problem. He wants to own his own garage and be a licensed mechanic. He talked a lot the previous year, how much money he could make with his friend, etc. So I was happy for him, asked him about his plans, but didn't hold my breath. He keeps coming by and keeps passing his classes. Eventually, years later, it's March, and guess who comes into my first period with Chick-fil-A and a mechanic's uniform with his name stitched on it? I watched him walk across the stage in May, the first person in his family with a college degree, a stable job, and I couldn't be prouder. That same year, my last year at that school, another teacher friend and I really mentored the heck out of a kiddo who was struggling with a bad, tough home life, failing classes, you name it. He's passing his classes in January, got credit for his fall semester classes, things are looking good, and he tags along with his brother and some friends to a Waffle House, and in the ensuing confusion of either a disagreement or an attempted robbery, depending on who you ask, he and his brother get shot by police officers on a Saturday night. Story 8. I was a lower than average performer at a college prep private school. There were around 30 kids in each class, and getting into Ivy Leagues was the ultimate goal for all of us. I was one of the handful of kids that couldn't achieve that, so just went on to a normal University of State school. Everyone else went to Harvard, UCLA, Brown, Yale, Berkeley, you name it. Of all of my classmates, I'm the only one pulling in $250,000 plus a year and in a high-level position at a large company. I don't mean for this to come off sounding like a brag or anything, but I'm proud of what I've become, and I know that my teachers would never have bet on me to be the one to have been so successful. This sounds a lot like an example of a principle described in Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. Big fish in a small pond versus small fish in a big pond. A student excels in a lesser-known school, smaller pond, and moves on to a much bigger and more competitive school, big pond. Students then get discouraged by all of their new, incredibly smart and high-achieving peers, even though they are incredibly smart and talented in their own right, and stop believing in themselves or get frustrated. Sometimes being top dog in a less competitive environment can do wonders for your self-confidence and social skills. It's completely counterintuitive, but very interesting. Story 9. In junior high school, I came home crying from my gym teacher calling me a lazy fat kid because I didn't join the group activity and was off to the side sitting on the bench. In high school, my science teacher told me my grades were so bad that I wouldn't be able to be successful in university if I even got accepted. Fast forward to 4 years out of high school, I am in my third year of university and have maintained a 3.6 GPA while working full-time as a retail manager. I'm also preparing for my first solo double century 200-mile bike ride and am doing 200 to 300 miles per week. Sometimes you need people to tell you the real crap, the crap that will get you off your butt and prove to yourself you're not anything like they describe, and of course, prove them wrong in the process. Story 10. I was a student that always did well in school. I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA. I went to a community college for a few years and made a 3.5 GPA. Then disaster struck. I went suddenly blind for a year. I had two severe vitreous hemorrhages, one in each eye. Vision went from okay to legally blind in half an hour. The doctors couldn't do anything about it. I ended up dropping out of school, not being able to work or see or anything. Eventually, it healed enough. I wanted to go back to school, but my mom lost her job. I finally found a full-time job and did that for a few years. I started going blind again a few years later. This time, cataracts. I had almost no vision for 2 years, before the doctor did surgery. They could now see into the eyes after the surgery. I had developed glaucoma because the cataracts were so bad. I have now had permanent damage to my vision, have a million other problems, and now live on disability, homeless for the last 2 years. I went from being a really smart kid who defeated the odds, was a miracle baby as well, to a broke fat old guy with PTSD who can't even find a place to live. I don't feel sorry for myself. If anything, I'm angry. Oh well, I'm hoping to turn everything around in a few years. Story 11. In high school, I went to rehab twice, dropped out for a portion of senior year, and barely managed to graduate. I was high all the time, and by the end of it all, I was smoking meth regularly. I'm 20 now, and am coming up on 3 years clean and sober. Have one semester left before earning my associates in communications, and I'm currently working as a cameraman at a popular concert venue. I recently ran into an old English teacher of mine, and while I filled him in on how things are going, he just shook his head with his jaw open. I don't like to toot my own horn too frequently because I did a lot of damage back then, but seeing old faces who only remember the sick me is very gratifying. Story 12. It is strange to see that the more successful you are in young ages, the more is the probability of failing in the future. Maybe it is because people expect so much from you, and you get much pressure from them, ending up failing, depressed, etc. This is me right now. Transferred with a 3.8 GPA and a NASA internship to one of the most competitive universities in my state, immediately got a low-stress job that paid well. Family members who rarely spoke to me were praising me in social media, and by the second semester I was completely burned out. Classes got stupid hard, professors and TAs obviously didn't care. The study environment was hostile and toxic, and I started to waste so much time just commuting. Just driving like a mindless drone stuck in traffic twice per day, 5 days a week. Problems arose at home, and at some point I just snapped, said screw it all, bought a console and played a crap ton of games, got mostly C's on everything, and quit my job. I can't say I'm way happier now, but things suck less, that's for sure. Story 13. Ex-college professor here. For some of my students, I define graduating as succeeding amazingly. Here are some of my favorites. One kid had been in a terrible car accident and had traumatic brain injury. All of the odds were stacked against him. He walked with a heavy limp and still had some memory challenges. My standing rule was that so long as you did the work in my class, I would give you as much extra help as you did the work for. He did an unbelievable ton of work to keep up. We both did. We'd meet and go over his notes and make sure he hadn't misremembered anything, re-explain things that had slipped, and he always put in more than full effort. I can still remember hearing him coming up the hall with his distinctive gait. Few years later, he graduated. Hurrah. And also was in incredible physical condition. He was so determined to rehab that he walked everywhere. I'd see him miles from campus, working his way along the side of the road. He barely limped at all the last I saw him and was sun-bronzed and confident and smiling. It did my heart good. Another student was ex-military, dealing with PTSD and being a single parent while also working and making it through college. I can't say how much I respected this guy. He got through, got out, got a good job, and his kids are heading toward college. I still hear from him from time to time. I used to love to see another of my students tearing into class, still wearing his Blockbuster shirt. Yep, been a while. He married young, thought he had a kid, but was making his way through our small local branch college and working at the same time. He had wonderful passion for his studies. One of my fondest memories from my time teaching college was him discussing a Wordsworth poem in our advanced poetry class. He was just animated with joy and excitement and understanding of the beauty of the thing. He graduated, and I hope he's living a happy life. I only know of one promising student who, through no fault of his own, never got to go forth into the bright world. He's the first person I ever knew who died so young and so full of promise. And the phone call telling me remains one of the most terrible moments of my life. Story 14. One of my favorite former students was a straight up genius, writing beautiful papers in ninth grade that were college level insightful, topping every statewide academic competition we let her compete in, just generally killing it. Also, a genuinely lovely human, always nice and helpful and polite. She got a full scholarship to a fantastic college, and I was so excited to find out what kind of incredible things she'd accomplish. Found out last week that she dropped out during her freshman year and works at Pizza Hut and spends most of her time sending out snaps about getting high. If that's what makes her happy, then I'm happy for her. But she could literally do anything she wanted to with her amazing brain and attitude, so I hope that's what she really wants to do. Story 15. One of my good friends in high school was brilliant. He wasn't valedictorian, but he was up there. Graduated with honors, beta club, and NHS member, the works. He gets a scholarship for a full ride to arguably the most well-known university in my state, which is huge because his family is dirt poor. So poor that he didn't get a car until he was 18, and only because his uncle sent him money to pay for it. He says he's going to study aerospace engineering like his uncle. He meets a girl at a football game, and they start drinking. He gets involved with alcohol and substances. So involved that when I gave him a ride from our hometown back to school at the end of Christmas break, he was transporting at least 1 pound and made me an unknowing mule. Little while later, a girl from before is driving his uninsured car and hits a motorcyclist. Not only that, she proceeds to run. Cops catch her, she goes to jail, and his car is impounded. Later finds out it's totaled after he pays to get it out. Since he sunk all his money into substances and his gaming PC, he can't afford a new car or any of the fees and tickets from the accident. Shortly after that, he gets kicked out of university. Scholarship revoked. He now waits tables at the Logan's Roadhouse here at home. Still has no car from what I know. I quit talking to him after he refused to pay me in actual money for driving him 3 hours back to his university when I had class the next morning back at mine. He tried to pay me in pot instead of something I could actually use, like gas money. Story 16. One of my brightest students ended up getting into an American university. They lasted 1 semester before giving up, staying in America, and getting pregnant. In another country, my valedictorian got into an American university and immediately fell in love with and got married to a graduating senior. She dropped out of university to be with him, and now she's pregnant. I don't have any stories of my poor students being much more successful than I anticipated. I do have stories of my own high school classmates. Surprisingly, it was the low A or high B students that ended up most successful, becoming doctors and entrepreneurs, usually outperforming the high A students. There was one of my classmates who was a C student who became successful. If by successful you mean joined a pyramid scheme and successfully convinced a bunch of people to join below him. So I guess the common thread here is that successful students can lose it if they have children early. Story 17. Obligatory, not a teacher, but a student. When I started high school, I was depressed and didn't care, doing rather awful in most of my classes. I had a geography teacher who always took the time to ask me about my day, and if I was missing school, she'd ask if I was all right whenever I started going to her class again. She ended up retiring at the end of that semester, and I didn't see her until a few days ago. When I saw her, I was running down the street with a black pouch for a bank run, a lanyard of a well-known financial institution around my neck, where I now work full-time, and a smile on my face. It felt good knowing she was witnessing just how much things have changed for me, and I hope she knows she played a huge part in it. I'm now also in a relationship with the guy she always sat beside me with 5 years ago. Story 18. Well, to the teachers out there, here's my advice to you as a very successful kid in high school and still at college. Worry about them. I think schools give too much focus on the students that apparently are going to be failures in life and believe the students with the best grades have their lives solved and are far more mature than the rest of them. Please talk to them, encourage them to worry less about study and live their younger years to the fullest. Worry if they have overprotective parents or fear their reaction if they're not successful top students. I'm not that bad as many of those mentioned here, but I guess I would have chosen a better career, would understand better social life, and would have surpassed my anxiety years before. In my honest opinion, I deeply regret being such a top grade student and not enjoying neither my childhood nor my teenage years. Story 19. I'll give this to you from 2 points of view. When I graduated college, my mom said, out of your sisters, who thought it would be you to graduate first? I'm about to finish my master's and am in a much more successful position than my sisters. Just because a kid struggles in HS doesn't mean they will struggle in life. I work at a college now and do some recruiting. I saw the same extremely successful kid 2 years in a row. He wasn't going to come to our school. We didn't have the right programs. But he was extremely smart and nice to speak with. He tried to end his life before graduation this year and is now testing for his GED. He emails me sometimes. I always try to give the best advice I can, but I never really have the perfect answer for him.